I become a maid. Mum gives me a quick once-over, twirls her finger to make me turn around so she can check my braid, the back of my dress, opens the door without a word, steps out into the street. I'm starched and ironed within an inch of my life. My shoes are polished bright, my cuffs and collar are scratchy new. Any specks of dust that came near take one look at my brilliant white apron, then turn and run shrieking in fear. Which is what I want to do. Instead of walking down Market Street on my way to meet Mr. Greenwood with everyone watching me, knowing where I was going, and why, I hear them in my head. The woman in Miss Miller's shopping, behind their bits of fodral, chirping to one another in their high little voices, "Order! Obedience! Organization!" That's what every service will teach her. High time she learned her place. And then they'll waddle off to lunch, delighted that their world is safe, and no little upstart of a fatherless girl will steal the role of queen away from their well-bred daughters. I realize everything is quiet. I come back to myself. I'm still in the doorway. Mum has stopped a few doors down and is turning back to look at me. I expect her to give me a tongue-lashing, but instead she sighs. "Coming, then?" I pull the door shut behind me. The click is a finality, as if I'm leaving this life forever. Which is silly, I think, as I walk through the crisp morning air. It's not like I'm leaving home. I'm only going to be a daily, if I get the position. "It's a good place," says Mom again. "You'll stay busy doing it all by yourself, cooking and cleaning. But at least there's no strutting pigeon of a housekeeper finding fault with all you do, like the big houses. No screaming children grabbing at your apron strings, adding to your work." She talks us down the street, the words a lifeless line to keep me from drowning under what everyone must be saying. Like the girls at school and the new teacher, I see Caroline leaning over to whisper to Mary, laughing, and my desk so empty. It's like I never belonged there in the first place. Like I never even existed. "Are you listening to me?" says Mom again, and I see I've stopped and she's stopped too, and she's shaking her head. We start walking again, more briskly now, as the road twists away from the shops and climbs uphill towards the edge of the village. "You're lucky to be coming home every night." The church bell starts to strike. Bong! And not sleeping in some closet in an attic with bong! Scullery work on your only task all day, turning your skin raw to the bong! Elbows and ladies' maids and valets and cooks bong! Lording it over you. No, as I said, it's lucky I ran into Mrs. Beale, bong! When I did, before Mr. Greenwood could even post, bong! The position, or believe me, it wouldn't have lasted. So you be, bong! Sure to work hard and be respectful and quiet and obedient because, bong! You don't want to mess this up." As the last reverence fade, I hear her sigh again, reminding me of how much I've messed up so far. "Patience," she says for the 1000th time, "is a virtue." All those bongs have carried up the hill, across the bridge, along the isolated road and house nestled on the edge of the woods. Mom sighs again, but for once it isn't about me. "The poor dear man," she says, shaking her head slow and sad. "How can he stand to live here after what happened? So close to these woods and the cliffs down to the sea, knowing those little bones are out there." She opens the gate and waits for me to step through. "Well, come along then," she says, all brisk again, and she's knocking at the door. There's a long wait. Nothing. Maybe she heard wrong. Maybe he isn't expecting us. Maybe he doesn't want me after all. Maybe he died in his sleep. Maybe. There's a slow rattling at the door, as unlocks and swings inward. Mr. Greenwood is bent over, looking far older than his 60 years or so. He'd be tall if he stood up straight. That's what Mom said. How tall and handsome and proud he was when his wife was alive and the boy was born. How his gaze was bright and sharp. How those brows, now tangled gray thicket, were as bold as an eagle's brow, and his hands were the cleverest hands you ever did see, with long fingers as nimble as his mind, always coming up with new inventions, before the tragedy, before he gave up and stopped doing anything but wandering the woods. Still looking. A shiver runs through me. But Mom is standing right next to me, and she gives me a quick whack on the backside, and I remember. I curtsy all polite, bob my head and say, "Addie Morrow at your service, sir." He nods, opening at the door wider, and then without a word he turns and creaks down the hallway. We follow Mum, shutting the door behind us. With the door goes the sunlight. The hall is paled to the top with wood so dark, it's like walking into a cavern. Thick carpeting swallows our footsteps. We pass several closed doors before Mr. Greenwood leads us into the sitting room with a great padded chair in front of a meager fire. The windows with curtains so heavy the velvet obscures all but a silver of light. Everything feels obscured. The walls behind jumbled bookcases, the floor beneath a dense oriental carpet, but over the mantel there's one spot of brightness, a painting of a beautiful young woman with that swooped-up hair they used to have, and one of those high lace collars. She gazes out, warm eyes that are the most remarkable bright blue. "Won't you have a seat?" His voice is rough, as if he's not accustomed to talking much. Then he's looking around, and we're all realizing there aren't any more chairs. One chair for one old man. "No, thank you, Mr. Greenwood, sir. We prefer to stand," says Mum. She waits for him to speak, but there's only an awkward pause, stretching out longer and longer. Finally she says, "With your permission, sir, I was wondering if we might discuss Addie's hours." He nods. "I understand Mrs. Bale comes in at 8, but Addie would prefer to start earlier, if it please you." Again, only a nod. "As for cooking, Addie can't do anything fancy, but she's fine at the basics, and she's a quick learner. A simple breakfast, lunch, tea, and she'll leave you for dinner. Is that right? Now when you entertain—" "I don't entertain," he rasps, "and no lunch. I am out much of the day." I almost sigh in relief. Now the two of them are talking wages and uniform and days off, and before long it's all passing over me in a wash. There's a sadness in this house, no matter how thick the carpet or crowded the shelves, a sadness so deep it could swallow you whole. In my head I hear Mum's voice again from last night, and I'm seeing not to the drawing room, but woods and wild wind-tossed branches. "They searched everywhere for that boy," she said. "Mr. Greenwood, he looked like a madman, eyes wild and darting, hair practically standing on end, kept saying how the boy was all he had left in the world, with his wife dead and gone, and how he'd never forgive himself for giving the nurse the day off. The maid was busy in the kitchen, you see, and the boy was supposed to be napping, but they discovered the back door wide open, and the boy was nowhere to be found. Barely 2 years old he was. You were but a few months yourself, and everything to me, and it cut me to the core knowing how Mr. Greenwood must be feeling. Then on the third day, when they'd mostly given up hope, they come across Mr. Greenwood atop the cliffs, not far from those castle ruins, starting down at the sea, and it crashes into the rocks, like doom itself. A good place to jump and end your anguish. They talked him back from the edge, with gentle voices and soft moves, and still calling him, 'James, James,' as if the child could hear. Oh, it was enough to break your heart. The doctor sedated him, keeping him sleeping for almost a week, and he's never been the same since." Silence pulls me back to the room. Mum and Mr. Greenwood are both looking at me, waiting. I have no idea what they just asked, so I bob another curtsy and say, "Yes, sir." "That seems to do it." Mr. Greenwood shuffles up the hall and opens the heavy door. "Tomorrow morning," he says, that voice like rust. "Good day." The fresh air hits me with a wallop. What just happened? Where have I been?